Down today to show my solidarity to the Korean American community here, the Asian American community here, with the people of Georgia as a whole, because the tragedy that occurred in this community is one that affects us all over the country. As a son of Korean immigrants, raising two Korean American little boys, this hit me very personally. And I'll tell you, today was one of the most powerful days of my life, to come here and to hear and talk to victims, families, and to hear about their struggles, comprehending what had happened with the loss of a loved one. And also with the Korean community, we just had a very powerful and informative roundtable discussion, bringing together community leaders across the Korean American community in politics and business, organizing in different ways. And we're trying to share some of our best practices, think about how we sustained this attention, sustained this progress. One of the biggest concerns that I have is that this energy that we see right now, that this will dissipate and fade without putting into place the kind of change or the process towards change that we need as a community. I think that it's hard. It's very hard, and it's something that just hits us so emotionally about what we saw and what we're going through. I don't want us to lose that feeling and lose that experience here. So I just want to say thank you again for taking a little time. I'm happy I can't stay too long, but I'm happy to answer any and all questions if you have any. Please go ahead.
If you don't mind, could you open to the previous meeting? I understand that you met some Korean leadership group. So if you don't mind, could you open some summary or any
of the discussion that we just had?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we just had this roundtable discussion with a number of different leaders, and I want to just thank Sam as well. Why don't you come up here and just thank him for so much for his leadership and setting forward, not just in terms of being a Korean American leader in the community, but a new generation of leadership that we need in this country as a whole. This conversation came out from me talking to Sam and several others about how we move forward here. We had a conversation about how do we strengthen the Korean American community, how do we strengthen ties and make sure that this is happening on a more frequent and regular basis. I also talked with the community here about how do we strengthen the connections between the Korean American community and the Asian American community here in Georgia with the community across the country. Whether in New Jersey, where we have a large and strong, vibrant Korean American community there as well, or New York or California or Chicago or elsewhere, we need to find ways to be able to connect that better. Make sure we're listening to each other and exchanging ideas, seeing how we can help each other out. So that's something that we committed ourselves to doing. We're also exploring other ideas like how do we better tell the history of Korean Americans in this country or Asian Americans in this country? How are ways that we can really show and make sure that we're visible and that we are proud of our heritage and showcasing that to others around the country? So those are a few of the ideas that we talked about amongst a number of others. We're not going to be able to solve all these problems or come up with that perfect plan just yet, but we all committed to each other that we keep up with this and work with each other to be able to do that.
Also, I have one more question. So what are you going to do as the congressman after this meeting or this event as the second generation of the Korean American congressman? So what are you going to do at the Washington, D.C.?
In terms of what we want to get done in Congress following up on this tragedy, is that we want to, first of all, make sure that the Asian American voice and the Korean American voice, that we have a seat at the table and a voice in the room. And I'm certainly going to do my part where I can. We are trying to get greater representation at high levels throughout government. I've been pressing President Biden's team and the White House to just make sure that we're lifting up our voices, that we have the kind of interactions and the kind of connections with the White House and elsewhere in Congress to make sure that we are following up on these ideas. We also need to make sure that we're taking strong steps to try to take steps on gun violence prevention, on hate crimes, on other types of discrimination and areas like that we can move forward on. We have a number of bills in Congress right now that are trying to give more resources to communities like the community here to be able to track and monitor and combat hate crimes and other forms of discrimination, whether that's regarding the coronavirus crisis or other forms of discrimination and racism that we face. So those are some immediate steps that we are already working on. Another question? Anything else?
Also, could you give us a message to the Korean community in leaving the Metro Atlanta?
Yeah. I want to just say to the Korean American community here in Metro Atlanta and throughout Georgia that I'm unbelievably proud of your resilience, your strength through such a tough time, for everything that you went through. I can't imagine how tough it's been over the last 2 weeks, and even before that. I want you to know that me and my family and people around this country, frankly around the world, stand with you. And we want to do everything we can to be able to help you recover from this and build a more secure future for you and your loved ones. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be staying in touch with your leaders here like Sam, and we'll make sure that we're working on this together. Thank you.
The thing I would add simply is we have to vote. Our community, if we want to ensure that our voice is heard in this country, vote in every single election. Hold your elected officials accountable. We can do an enormous amount of good. We can pass legislation that provides for gun safety to prevent these sorts of horrific accidents from happening again. But that falls on each and every one of us to make sure that you vote. Thank you.
Thank you.